projects and community research and things like that in their classes, which really doesn't cost any money. It requires the teacher to be a little bit more creative or clever about how to make their class plug in more, right? So there's really not a lot of money there. For us, we get a budget every year. We hire a couple of graduate students who work with us. The conference costs money. We're bringing people in from all over the world, and a lot of people are coming from universities in developing countries that couldn't afford to come, so we're buying plane tickets for a few people to come and things like that. So it doesn't cost a lot in that sense. Actually, I think we get more back than we actually spend. I think that's the way I would look at it.
Oh, that's great.
Let me ask Paulette, you about Lowell Community Health. Can you tell us a little bit about your organization and how your organization is partnered up with the university?
Well, Lowell Community Health Center is like all community health centers across the nation. Came out of a lot of the civil rights movements in the 60s, frankly, creating equity. And the mission of every community health center may be a little bit different, but at the core is to decrease barriers that people perceive so that they can access health care. And those barriers can be financial barriers, they can be cultural barriers, they can be language barriers, they can be just, what a person's perception is. So in Lowell, Lowell Community Health Center is, we often call it the best kept secret in Lowell. We provide primary care. That means the same sort of care, and I actually am a patient there as well. We've often talked about we could start doing commercials. Not only do I work there, I'm a patient, but we provide health care to 20% of the population of Lowell. And within that is health care in our pediatrics department that provides health care to about 50% of the school-age children in the city. So it's a significant number of people that we touch for primary care, and that's delivered by physicians and nurse practitioners and physician assistants. We have certified nurse midwives, so we do about 400 births a year at Lowell General Hospital. And we have a family practice unit. We have school-based health centers, one at Lowell High School, which is the only high school in the city, where students can come in and see a nurse practitioner, have a physical for sports physicals, work physicals, if they've got asthma that needs to be controlled, which decreases their amount of time out of school. We are also one of the vital links in terms of the continuum of health care in the city, in terms that we provide care still from the uncompensated care pool, that people call it the free care pool, which is really not free. And we're part of the new initiative to where citizens in the Commonwealth all have to purchase health care. People who had been getting free care, been on self-care rolls, have been directed to community health centers. So we also have people on staff who speak, I think we're up to 14 languages within the health center, in addition to what we can get from the AT&T talk line. 4 primary languages: English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Khmer. And we have people within all of the disciplines in the health center who speak those languages, so that it's really embedded within our culture at the health center, that you can go to any site and be seen and taken care of, and have someone be able to provide care for you in your language and understand your culture. Which is a huge issue for many people. And language is probably the biggest issue in terms of, I'm a nurse, I'm a registered nurse, I've worked as a nurse, I worked as a nurse for many years. And healthcare is very complicated. And when you're receiving information in a language that is not your primary language, it must be terrifying, because I know I've gotten news about healthcare issues associated with my family, and I'm a healthcare professional, and I'm an English speaker, where I found, my goodness, do I really understand that, and had to seek answers. So it's an access point.
Mary Beth, do you have a question for Paulette or Professor Parent?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could explain the idea of sustainable development.
Sustainable development? Big question. Good question. Big question. I'll give you the 5-cent answer instead of the professor's really long answer. How's that? Okay. The idea is that if we're going to think about, which the university does, how to get more jobs and how to revitalize the regional economy, we should be doing that in a way that, in sciences and engineering, and the way people are designing new products and new materials and things like that, that they're not going to do major harm to the environment, so that people are working, for example, in the engineering schools on biodegradable materials, and so things aren't being made out of plastic that fills up a landfill, things like that. Also, the link to that are things like education, so that if we're going to talk about, say, the big thing, a lot of discussion at the university is about nanotechnology, and don't ask me to explain that, but I know enough about it to know it's way too much physics and chemistry, but
Small, very
very
small.
tiny stuff, right? And anyway, but the idea is that if we're going to talk about that as a way to provide some sustainable development, meaning a jobs future for the people that live in the region, we also have to think about education so that the kids that grow up in Lowell can get those jobs. So the idea is to be thinking in as comprehensive a way, which is not usually the way people do economic development. They'll plop a factory here or put a building up there and not think of the immediate consequences as well as the longer term ones. So we don't want to, I mean, there are famous stories about Lowell in the 19th century that it was a good day when the river was running blue, red, or green, because that meant a lot of cloth was made and had been dyed, and at the end of the day when they closed the mills they would dump all the waste dye into the river, and when you went across the bridges as you were walking home you would see whatever color had been made that day, and that's not sustainable development. That's actually doing harm. So the idea is to try to think that way and think longer term than we customarily think. It's a good question.
Can I follow up with that? How did you become involved? I understand that, you know, Lowell Community Health has partnered up with the university, and I'm actually going to ask each of you, how did you personally become involved in the fields that you're in? What inspired you? Maybe a personal story.
Well, it's interesting. I'd actually I think one of the things that I'd like to go back to that'll lead to that is when Bob was talking about who supports the advisory council and what goes on. That was very much a culture change, I think, within the university when the chancellor wanted that to happen.
Right.
I had worked for the city prior to working for Lowell Community Health Center, and had been engaged both in the city and initially in my career at the health center by faculty members, but almost in a guerrilla fashion. It wasn't necessarily frowned upon, but it certainly wasn't supported. And it was mainly people in the social sciences, but lately I have found out that people in the College of Engineering, you know, would do community service work, but it wasn't recognized, and I don't think it was as valued as it is now. And that's one of the things when Bob was talking about faculty members who participate in this. The culture has changed so that now that's an expectation within the university that people participate in community events, and the value for their students is a bonus in that. So I really think that having seen all of that, it's a really important thing to, you know, in terms of the chronology, how many more people have become engaged, and it's more sort of it's sort of the expectation among a certain group of people. And in terms of Lowell Community Health Center being connected with the university, we see a significant amount of the population. UMass Lowell is a research university. You have a significant, now it's the College of Health and Environment, but the School of Health and Environment, but the health profession school needed clinical opportunities and those sorts of things. So that was the initial way, but we do a lot of health promotion and human and youth development and those sorts of things.
And Professor Ferrant, how did you become involved in all of this? Was this like through graduate school or before then? Or, I mean, how are you tied to Lowell?
Well, I'm tied to Lowell only physically in a sense that I moved to Lowell about 18 months ago. But so as far as that tie is concerned, but I mean, I've been interested in this work out of my life story, which is that I actually was a machinist for a really long time, and lost my job when the factory I worked in closed, and it got me to thinking about what happens in places like, this was in Springfield in Western Massachusetts, and so what happens to people, what happens to places. And I ran a community economic development project for a while after the place I worked in closed, trying to figure out how to find jobs for everybody that lost them. And then after that I actually went back to graduate school and got my PhD. And just as I graduated, which was really lucky for me, the university was beginning to sort of embark on this new kind of a mission, and they had a job advertised, and I said, oh, I can do that. And fortunately for me and for them, they hired me.